Hey, sports fans, Larry to RunBlogRun. It's Athletic Chat number 24.
24.
Wow. Stuart, great to see you.
Yeah, have we really been doing this 24 times?
Can you believe it? That you haven't told me that you're going to have my country invaded or something? It was great. Thank you. I see that Boris Johnson is waiting to decide what he's going to do about Brexit till he determines what our election will be in a week. So we'll have to see. It'll keep it interesting. Well, both sides of the pond are having some. It's rather strange, So
yeah.
Although I do recall in 2014, I was over in the UK for your election, and I loved how people could have discussions and not insult each other, because I hadn't seen that over here in a few years, So the good old days.
Yeah.
So we've got a whole bunch of topics, but we got to do the little preamble. Stuart is in Oxford, England, the intellectual capital of the world. I'm outside of Madison, Wisconsin, in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. We had our first snow of the year, which to me is a magical moment. I woke up at 5 a.m. and there was snow on my roof and in my backyard. But it's gone away, alas. But we'll get some good snow probably in about a month. But Stuart, I always enjoy speaking with you, and we've made it. It's now 24 weeks. I think it was Michael and Adam who suggested that you and I chat once a week because we could solve many of the world's problems. Like over here, that U.S. broadcasting show on NBC, I think was it, or no, CBS 60 Minutes, So we don't do the interviews like that. Okay, so we're going to start from the beginning. Nathan Lieber. Nathan Lieber got some difficult news today. Apparently his artificial legs are considered aiding him in able-bodied competition, so he can't compete in the Olympics. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, this isn't a new thing, because Oscar Pistorius was actually allowed to compete in the Olympics in 2012. They said he could only run in a race in lanes so that his prosthetic and his blades didn't interfere, and he could run in the relay with only the first leg, because, again, that's in lanes. But so that's not new, but an interesting one. There's a German long jumper, Marcus Rem.
Yes, I've seen him compete. Yeah,
twice finished first in the German national championship, leaping in long jump 8:24.
Wow!
But in neither time did he win it, because they wouldn't recognize. And he made a very interesting point. He said, well, okay, perhaps I do get more spring from my blade, but I'm running unbalanced. So I'm running less fast than a Greg Rutherford or a Jeffrey Henderson or Lieber. So actually, I don't think I do have an advantage. And then he also says, well, if the blades make such a difference, why am I the only one in the world with a prosthetic who can jump 8 meters?
Wow.
And the argument is that there may be people like Lieber, like Pistorius before his life fell apart, like Rem, who are actually the Usain Bolts of the sport, and that it's their talent, not the technology. But it's a difficult issue, and Rem actually said, look, I don't care if I can't win a medal at the Olympics. What I really like to do is to have a chance to compete with people who are jumping the same distance as me, rather than at the Paralympics where I'm probably going to win easily. So it's an interesting topic. I just thought we should make sure people understood the issues for the few elite Paralympians who are actually good enough to compete in the so-called able-bodied competitions, but are not normally allowed to do so.
Very well said. Yeah, I thought that, the IAA, or World Athletics, I still like to call them the IAAF, responded rather quickly, and they obviously applauded it. They have gotten behind on several issues, so I think they're not going to let this one cause some issues. So, okay, well, Nathan, we're sorry about that. We will watch you in Paralympic competitions. We'll see what transpires if he appeals. So our next topic is kind of interesting. I was chatting with some friends this weekend, and they reminded me that the only major marathon in the spring of 2021 will be Boston right now. Everything else has moved to the fall. In the last couple of days, the Honolulu Marathon, that whack job, is kind of like the Beta Breakers for 26.2 miles. I think there's like 10 planes that come in from Japan Airlines, with thousands of Japanese marathoners. And I think the cutoff time is like 12 hours or something. So pretty much they can have a barbecue, take a nap, walk the marathon. So Honolulu is now a virtual race, like pretty much everything else in the world. And I've talked to some athletes about virtual races. Some seem to applaud it. Emily Sisson just ran a 2:38 marathon by herself. And there was an American man who ran a 2:21 in the virtual Boston. What's your thoughts about this?
I mean, it's great for the club runners. I would have thought I struggle with it probably for elite, because it just becomes a time trial rather than a race.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, marathons are about races and tactics and all that as much as just running a time.
Yeah.
I mean, London moved to the fall, or the autumn, as we would say, in the hope that they can have a normal marathon, feeling that if they had done it in April as usual, it would have to have been elite only and virtual for everyone else. So their hope by putting it off until October again is that they can actually have the traditional mass race with the elite.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's what all the other guys are thinking about too. All the other races. But I just wonder, we've talked about this before, until that vaccine becomes widespread, you're going to see limitations on things.
Very much so.
We've talked a little bit about athletes who used 2020 to learn a little more about their craft and to compete. We've had Laura Muir, Gemma Ricci, we've had Shelby Houlihan in the U.S., Mo Ahmed from Canada. We've had some very good sprinters who've competed well. Noah Lyles had a limited season. Donovan Brazier had 10 races. My gosh, he was all over the place. And then we've got athletes who kind of stayed dormant. Dean Asher-Smith kind of kept it really low-key, but so did others. Any deep thoughts about athletes who competed and didn't compete in 2020?
Well, actually, I do. Because actually, before I knew we were going to talk about this, I've had a look at, the number is random, but it just worked out this way. I had a look at 89 athletes that I know personally and just see what they did this year. And there are 16 of those did 5 or more competitions. 30 of them did 2 or more competitions. But 42 of them competed. I meant that 47 did not compete in their main event. 5 of them competed in another event. But I mean, just to give you 2 disciplines. In the women's 100 hurdles, Cindy O'Feely did 12 competitions. Megan Simmons did 7. Tiffany Porter did 5. But then you've got people like Kenny Harrison, Danielle Williams, Christine Clements, Brianna McNeil, who did not compete in one hurdles race.
Wow.
And you see, I think that depending where you were, what access you had to hurdles, because I mean, Danielle Williams said to me, look, she lives with Natoya Gould, and she says, well, look, Natoya's distance runner, all she needs to do is go out and run. Whereas I need hurdles. I need 100-meter straight, and I need hurdles. So I can't practice, so therefore I'm not in a position. Sure. And then look at three triple jumpers. Christian Taylor competed 8 times, Omar Craddock once, and Will Clay not at all. And I mean, I know that Christian came to Europe and did most of his competition in Europe because he was because his fiancée is from Austria. But it's interesting how people did it differently. But some of the strange ones that I've got, I mean, you mentioned Noah and so on. Raven Rogers was another. She came to Europe and did 5 races. Although interestingly, I think 3 of those were 400s and 2 were 800s. Jessica Beard told me that she had a chance to go to Europe, but she was actually scared to go because she thought, if I'm not just going for one race, what happens if I get quarantined somewhere? You know, if I have to stick 2 weeks before I can compete, or I can't get out of Europe. Mm-hmm. So she didn't go. Now, Cindy Ophelia, who did 12 competitions, told me that because she's still getting back to her best from the injury in 2018, she just feels she needs as many races as she can get. Yeah. And interesting, Labia Nielsen, who did 9 races in 8 countries in about 7 weeks, said she came back from that and said to her coach, I want to do that next year. I think I'm better the more I race. So it's interesting how people are doing it.
Sure.
And the two strange ones for me were Quinera Hayes, the 400 runner, who did 1 400, but did 9 hundreds and 200s. So interesting, somebody saying, well, I'm going to compete, but I'm not going to do my normal event. And then there was Corey Carter, who did a hurdles and 2 other races, but did them all in the same day.
Wow.
So it's fascinating how, but I mean, it's interesting that of my sample of 89, 42 did not compete at all.
Yeah.
And 5 of them just did a different event. So it is interesting how people have approached it, and some of it, I suppose, reflects just the difference in facilities that people had. Sure. How bad lockdown was. I mean, Abby Uruzuru, the British long jumper, was telling me that when she finally got access to the track, they said, the good news is you can have the track, but the bad news is you can't do any jumping in the pit.
Wow.
So it's been strange, and it has not been a level playing field, I think one should certainly say.
Well, I've talked to some of the brands, and as you could appreciate, they all want to be off the record. But the theme was that it seemed to me that most of the brands were trying to work with the athletes, but there was a universal frustration with an athlete jogging through an event or going and running a whole bunch of events at one meet, because that does nothing for the brand. The reason why brands sponsor athletes is to represent the brand and to show that their good fitness and good health has a benefit for the brand. So I'm really dumbfounded. Actually, the word we'll use is befuddled, that any agent would think that having an athlete run 6 events or 5 events at one meet does anything for the sponsors. And in fact, I think it tends to put the sport back a little bit. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those things are remedied. But you know, we've seen it before. There's times when managers and agents don't seem to appreciate that athletes have to do more than compete. You know, going to press conferences, being at press conferences on time. I remember back in in 2010 and 2011, James Dunaway, the late editor of American Track and Field, and I put together rankings for the top 25 agents. And we went to the meet directors in Europe. We asked them questions like, and James had put this together, did they show up for press conferences on time? Did they do the PR events for you? Did they actually show up for the meets? Things like that. And I was surprised about how many athletes with certain agents did not fulfill their duties. Now, it's much better now. And I think the majority of agents and managers get their athletes out there on time and things like that, especially in a year like this, because they know that putting on a meet is a virtually superhuman event. It's been crazy this year. So we will have to see. But thank you for doing your unofficial survey of 89 athletes. Without vaccines, can athletics move back to pre-pandemic?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But then, I mean, it's interesting this year that the number of athletes who have competed, like the Cindy Ophelis, going to 12, and the people who travelled around Europe doing. I think Lavia did 9 races in 8 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And the athletes were obviously prepared to take flights and go through different countries. I mean, Cindy Ophelia told me that she had signed so many pieces of paper, been tested for COVID so many times this year in order to be able to compete. But I don't know. I mean, the World Indoors apparently is taking place in Shanghai next March. I can't imagine there'll be a lot of people going to that.
No, I question the World Indoors in China. I also question the Olympics in China in 2022. I just don't know if there'll be the confidence among the athletes, officials, and audience for such events. Tokyo, who's going to go if it happens?
Well, I think that's the one that most athletes will want to do, because unless your name is Veronica Campbell-Brown, who of course has done 5 Olympics, and is not ruled out next year, most athletes probably get 2 shots at an Olympics when they're something like at their peak. And so if you opt out of that, it may not come again.
Yeah.
And especially if you're an American athlete, that you can be incredibly good, but not manage to come in the top 3 in the trials on the day.
Yeah.
So I think that the Olympics people will take the risk. Because it's once in 4 years and because it's the pinnacle of the sport. I mean, the Olympics is 9, 10 months away. So it may be that the vaccine will have come, but then interesting, I was hearing a news story today saying that, of course, it's one thing for a vaccine to work in trials and to work in the laboratory, as opposed to actually working and giving people the immunity that for a significant period. So it's going to be touch and go whether there is a vaccine in time for next year. But if the Olympics goes ahead, I would have thought that a lot of athletes would just take that risk.
Okay. 2022. Are we really waiting until then? We've got the Commonwealth Games scheduled for 2022. We've got the World Outdoors. We've got Europeans. That seems like it's going to be a big year. With the way they're talking about the vaccines, is that when we're really going to see the season, the athletics opening up again?
Well, I think that 2022 is going to be the first year that we're going to have a full season where people like you and I can expect to go to Diamond League after Diamond League and to the championships. Because next year, I think that I fear that next year will be just the same as this year, and that either events will be cancelled or events won't seem worth going to. Because in many ways, I feel sad that I didn't get to places like Stockholm and Monaco. But the athletes I talked to are saying it really was hardly worth going because it was such a totally different organization. From a media point of view, contact with athletes before the event discouraged, no proper mix zone to talk to athletes in. So you wonder really what you get out of going.
It's the interaction.
If next year is going to be the same, and again, people were saying to me, well, normally you have a long lunch and catch up with colleagues, but it was to get your food in out. So I fear that certainly the first half of next year is going to be like that. I mean, whether we can get the athletes, whether we can get the vaccine in time for the Olympics to be relatively normal, I don't know. But in many ways, knowing how Olympics works with 15,000 people living side by side, social distancing just isn't going to be possible.
Yeah. What was interesting about this season from a media standpoint, and I just found this out this last weekend, is in working with one of my advertisers, we were keeping track of how our audiences were being activated. And what I mean by that is, did they do something while watching? Did they check on an ad? Did they respond to us and things like that? And as you and I did the remote coverage of the season in August and September, our numbers tripled. And it was interesting to me. They were as strong as when we were there. I think what we did better this time, at least, so what we need to disclose to people is during the summer, you and I were 9 hours apart, 8 to 9 hours apart. I was in California. And so during most of the season, when I would wake up at 8 a.m., by that time, you had 20 pictures up. And the first thing that I would do is get the photos up with a quick update on what they were from. And we got people excited. And then we would put up the results, and then we would put up stories, and then we would put links to videos. And we just have a little process about it. And what's interesting is that while, yes, that was perfect for American audiences, about 80% of our readership in those events is global. So even people in Europe who had had the benefit of seeing the meets were checking out our photos, then going to our stories. Then we were starting to use what I loved was how you were getting those small 90-second videos from the virtual mix zones. And we started putting those up on social media, and our readers absolutely loved it. So it's interesting to me how we're educating our readers into using the different, paradigms. And I think that's really helped us. I've got to put something together for Matthew Quine, the Diamond League media manager, just on how things went for us this year. So I'm also comparing 2017, 18, 19, and 20 in terms of social media traffic. So I'll share that with you as well. But no, I think that people were starved for athletics. Over here right now, Americans are all crazy about American football. My son and Mike Deering, our producer, they love that stuff. They play fantasy football and all that jazz. And I look at an American football game and I say, okay, this guy's running. This is how we can make him a better athlete, that kind of a thing. I've never, during football season, I was out fishing and hunting with my dad. That's what I did. Or, I ran cross country. I was never, but, thank God my son is, a little more developed than me and can get that stuff. The indoor season, 2021, we got to enjoy a 2020 indoor season. Are we going to have a 2021 season?
I believe there is an outline schedule, but rumor has it that it does not include the UK.
And any new updates on that, Stuart?
I have not had. The British Athletics official position when I last spoke was that we haven't announced anything yet. We don't normally do it in October, but equally, I think that, and I do understand this. It's different from the Diamond Leagues. I think that it would be the Birmingham Grand Prix is not viable without spectators.
Yeah.
So therefore, it won't take place.
Okay.
Because that's what they said with the Diamond League in the summer, that it's just not viable without spectators. And as things are at the moment, there's very little chance of there being spectators at sports events in January, February.
Okay.
At the moment, we're not having any spectators at live sport at the moment at the professional level.
Do you see anything on like the British Indoor Championships or anything about that? Is again still kind of premature?
I think there will be a British Indoor Championships, but it will be like the British Outdoor in September.
Mm-hmm.
It will be without spectators, and questionable whether it's even worth going from a media point of view, because I imagine, at the British Outdoor Championships in September, there was no mix zone, no access to athletes. So you'd effectively sit in your seat and watch the action live as opposed to watching it on television, which of course is a good thing. But that's all you get out of it.
So here was a topic I was thinking about. We loved the World Championships in London. It was a fantastic event. It was relatively easy to get around. As crazy as London is, with a few 100,000 more close friends. Why not? Why does the World Championships have a permanent site, and why doesn't the Olympics have a permanent site? I mean, I've heard for years that the Athens. If we had the Olympics in Athens every 4 years, what that would do to the economy. And in 2004, I had a blast there. I took Adam. That was the first time I took him to an Olympics, and we just had a great time. Why do you think that the powers that be don't look at permanent sites for these events?
Well, the reason that we were in Doha in the heat and late at night, we were told, was to grow the sport in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And to allow other countries to experience it. And I think I can say this without being biased. The way that London did the 2017 World Championship and the crowds that it produced and the atmosphere was on a totally different level from Beijing 2015, Moscow 2013, Daegu 2011. Berlin, Germany is a good athletics city, and 2009 has a good atmosphere. But that I think everyone had misgivings about Doha, and I'm sure that the US will do a good job with the next one. But I think that there's no doubt that London did it well and would do it well again. And you have a good and knowledgeable crowd, and London is not a difficult city to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is this principle that people feel that it needs to go around the world. But again, one of the things that I was concerned about when people said it shouldn't be going to Doha, it shouldn't be going to Doha because it's too hot there. It's also hot in some parts of the States. It's also hot in Australia. Like the Commonwealth Games, marathons, there were people dropping out because of heat exhaustion. So there is a danger. You say, well, these events can only take place in temperate climates. So it's, to me, the question is, what are you trying to achieve? If you want to have the best possible event, then yes, have it in London all the time. But if you're trying to grow the sport around the world, then that's a different issue. It certainly was disappointing for people having the highlight of their careers in Doha at midnight with no spectators there.
Yeah. No, I thought that was the up until the last 3 days in Khalifa, the crowds were. I've seen bigger crowds in a lot of college invitationals in the U.S. And the disappointment among the athletes and some of the medal ceremonies about how few people saw them was poignant. I understand the cultural changes, but I just recall the World Cup in 2006 in Athens, and 3 hours before the meet, there was 1,000 people in the stands, and an hour before the meet, there was 40,000 people in the stands. And what they did was they offered some young fans free tickets. They gave them sandwiches. They gave them T-shirts. They gave them discounted shoes, things like that. It looked good for TV. And at the end of the day, you got to take care of the sponsors who foot most of the bills, and that's a challenge. I thought that the way they handled the lack of fans this year was tremendous. The piped-in sound was a little hokey at times. The competitions were good. I'm still trying to get my head around why people were upset with the wave light technology. Part of it was everybody said, well, it was so new. Well, it's not new. It was first used in 1973 and 74 in the American professional circuit, which was called the ITA. And I remember watching it on TV where Ben Gipshow ran an 8:25 2-mile and came back and ran a 3:56 mile. And, you had some American stars there too. You had Ben Gipshow, you had a few others, but it had been used before. And it's not like it's really helping them run. It's exciting. It's great to watch on TV, but I'm not sure that it's got to be less helpful than having pacemakers, The nice thing I thought about Cheptegei and Let's Senbits today, I terribly pronounced her name, her world record and Sifan Hassan's record was that, well, for Cheptegei and Gidey, they ran the second half of the races by themselves. I mean, a la Ron Clark. That was exciting, and it was tough. Sifan Hassan, Laura Whiteman, went with her for a while, but Hassan had a run in a virtual hurricane. That was amazing. If any of our viewers haven't seen that, please check it out. And Hassan has, she's been able to race from 1,500 to the half marathon. That's the way her coach trains her, and it's very interesting to see athletes with that kind of range too, and able to compete. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how, what they do next year. I thought it was a great way to end the season. And Mike is now telling me that we're down to about 4 minutes left in time. So, Stuart, you've survived another week with me. Can you believe it?
Yes, I have. Well, there we are.
Are you going to be able to get some golfing in this week?
I don't know. It's becoming more difficult because it's dark earlier, and it has to be when my son's finished work. So we'll see. But I'm not certain for this week. Okay.
Well, we will be chatting again next week, and that will be week 25. But thank you again. I'm glad to see that you're okay and charming as always. And we'll be posting your stories this evening. Thank you for your Monday stories. But this is Lieber with RunBlogRun. This is Athletic Chat 24 with Stuart Weir. Thank you again. If you like us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you love us, subscribe on the YouTube. Hey, sports fans, it's Lieber. It's Athletics Chat 24. The Epilogue. Now, what's the Epilogue? It's where, well, I can talk for 5 minutes. I can talk for 10 minutes. I can talk for 30 minutes. But I'll probably talk for about 10. And just about the things we chatted about with Stuart this week. Just so you know, Mike Deering has asked that I wear my Russian winter hat. And so probably next week we'll do some Russian themes. We'll talk about some of my favorite Russian athletes and, various, doping issues, but also some of the good things about Russia too, which I really love that country and I'm fascinated with Russian history. So we'll chat. Okay, so today, Stuart, he was in Oxford, England, intellectual capital of the world. And I'm in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. One of the most contested states in our U.S. election. And please, everybody, vote. I don't even understand why we have to say it. If you live in a democracy, you have a responsibility to that democracy, and that is to exercise your right to vote, okay? And if you don't, you're copping out. No excuse. There is no excuse for not voting, okay? Do the research. This country does not ask a lot from you. And if you complain about current government or future governments, the only way you can complain is if you voted. If you don't vote, bullshit on you. Okay, that's my first digression. Let's see. And I'm drinking B-Power Kombucha today. I love this stuff. A couple times a week. It's good for you. It's healthy. Nathan Lieber. Nathan Lieber is a Paralympic athlete, and he's going to be staying a Paralympic athlete because CAS said, you're not competing in the Olympics. Now, you remember, Nathan has a artificial leg from his knee down, and CAS determined, and the World Athletics said, that it gives him an advantage over able-bodied athletes. Oscar Pistorius was allowed to compete in lanes before he played with his 52 guns and was spending the rest of his life in jail. Another digression. But so that's where that stays right now. We spoke about, was it Marcus Riem, the German long jumper, who I think is going 841. And he just wants to compete against people who are as good as him or better. I don't know why people decide to call me when I'm doing this stuff, but it just annoys the hell out of me. Anyway, and then the next point of discussion. So, Nathan, I'm sorry. You went through the system, which is what you're supposed to do. Sometimes things support you, sometimes things don't. This time it did not. He has a right to appeal, so we'll see what Nathan does, and we will follow up on that. All marathons besides Boston have moved to the fall of 2021. Why? Pandemic, kids. You got the pandemic and the flu. If you're one of any of the groups that are potentially harmed by pandemic, which most are, like me, you got to take, I'm getting the flu shot because this winter the flu and the pandemic It'll be a challenge. It's pretty simple. Wash your hands for 20 seconds often. Wear your mask inside always. When you're eating, and then when you're not eating, put your mask back on. When you're outdoors, keep a mask with you. If you're near people, if you're in a supermarket, wear your mask. Just please use common sense. You may be healthy as a, hog, but would you please think about other people? That's what the new patriotism is about. Taking care of other people. We can have different political views, but you're not going to hell because you believe differently than me, okay? And I'm not going to hell because I believe differently than you. That's really not what the whole, what Jesus is about, or Christianity. I hate to break it to you guys. So you got to kind of, pull your heads out on that stuff. Anyway, where are we at now? Oh, okay. So I was talking about fall marathons. Yeah, so most of the major marathons are in the fall. Reason being because they're hoping to avoid the pandemic and hoping to be able to get the big numbers back again. Boston's going to stay and try to be optimistic and keep it in the springtime. We wish them the very best. Really comes down to is how widespread a vaccine can be. The athletes who competed in 2020 or athletes who did not compete in 2020, Stuart Weir did a fascinating survey. He interviewed 89 athletes. 47 of them competed this spring and summer. 42 did not. And some of that 47 competed in events other than their own, which is kind of interesting too. And but how do you learn from a season like this? We leave it up to the individual athlete. When Tokyo was postponed, it shook a lot of people up. And that's why I don't think that the fans understand or appreciate that we even had a season, that we had a partial season was pretty incredible. The meet directors, the officials, I just did a conversation with Larry thanking the track officials. They did an incredible job. It had great stress to themselves and chances of getting sick. So thank you for putting on the meets that we got to watch, got to write about, got to enjoy, got to watch athletes compete at. Some athletes, 42%, about 50% of the athletes stayed dormant in 2020. What will they do in 2021? Well, we're hoping Tokyo comes off, but we think that they'll probably limit the audiences, limit the media. But let's just face it, putting 15,000 athletes in a small area for 18 days is this incredible petri dish of disease. And in a best year, people get sick. It's always happened. We told you last week about Brendan Foster, 1976, British athlete in the 10,000, got sick the week before. Stomach distress, bit of diarrhea. The guys don't get that. And in this, and at the very end, we hope that our friends at the IOC consider that, which we know they will. 2022, are we waiting until then? Well, 2022 has the Commonwealth Games, European Championships, and the World Championships. I really believe it's going to be until 2022 that everything gets halfway back to normal. I don't think we're going to be back to normal until 2024. Is there going to be a 2021 indoor season? I think so. I think it'll be limited. I don't think there'll be fans at the meets. Hopefully there'll be media, but we'll have to see. I still question whether anybody's going to go to Nanjing for the World Indoor Champs. And I question whether people will be going to the Winter Olympics in 2022. But that's a different story. It's Linday. Why not have the World Champs in London and keep the Olympics in Athens? We've talked about this stuff before, but Stuart had some good observations. The London World Champs was one of the finest ones that I've been to, and I've been going to them since 1995. Gothenburg was my first one. A lot of fun first time out of the country. And got to my first rave and talked to a hedgehog one night. I think there was alcohol involved. Anyhow, London would be great for a permanent site for the World Champs, but I think we're going to still see it move around. The Olympics in Athens would be a great way to take care of the Greek economy. But again, is that going to happen? Not sure. We'll have to see. Pandemic updates. It's crazy in the U.S. right now. People just are not doing the basic things. And I'm kind of shocked. I understand political differences, but wearing a mask has nothing to do with politics. And it's about taking us away from what really is going on. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Yes, you have the right to be stupid, but understand that in being stupid, you're hurting other people too. My mother hated that word. Actually, the word stupid was banned from the house. So in not thinking of other people, which is actually kind of a Christian precept, so it just kind of, and other religions too. All the religions have one major thing together, which is to love one another. And in this political climate right now, I don't think Democrats and Republicans are loving one another. They're hating one another. It's okay to disagree. I disagreed with the President Bushes, but I thought they were good and honorable men. I disagreed with Ronald Reagan, but I thought he was a good and honorable man. Didn't vote for him. Didn't mean I wanted him to go to hell. Did not mean I thought that Reagan winning was going to be the end of the world. And people are coming up with this BS that if the other candidate wins, it's the end of the world. Democracy is always fragile. And it's something that if you actually listened in history class or political science class, you would know that there has been challenges to the American democracy before. You want to keep our democracy strong, then you vote. If you don't vote, you really don't have squat to say. Okay? No excuse. No, the candidate's not good. Then run yourself. But just, bring the Whig Party back. Do something. Okay? So anyway, pandemic, yes, we are in a pandemic. So wash your hands 20 seconds, 4 or 5 times a day at least. Wear a mask indoors all the time, except when you're eating, and outdoors when you're closer than 6 feet to people. And it's the winter. It's harder to stay apart from people. So just be careful, okay? A vote one time, not like Mayor Daley used to say, vote early, vote often. I always thought that was funny, but some people believe that now. Okay, so if you like RunBlogRun, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you love RunBlogRun, subscribe on our YouTube station. We've got some really cool videos. We've got some great audio. We've got some pretty amazing stuff. And I think we've got things that you would enjoy. But thank you for supporting RunBlogRun since, 2007, and the Running Network since 1996. And it's still a struggle in media right now. But you watching our stuff means that there's more eyeballs, and then our advertisers pay for eyeballs. Okay, player eater, stay safe. Thank you for listening to Epilogue of Athletics Chat 24. Mike Deering, go have some dinner. Thank you again for putting up with me today. Talk to you soon.